You're listening to Dog Pound Podcast on WBLD, home of the B2 Bulldogs Radio Network.
Wow, what an introduction. And thank you to all of our listeners tuning in from around the world. You're listening to Dog Pound Podcast on WBLD, home of the B2 Bulldogs Radio Network. You can find this podcast on YouTube at B2 Bulldogs Media, on our Instagram page at B2 Bulldogs, and on the web at b2centerforhistory.wordpress.com. And today we're coming from you live here at West Point in our studio. Today we're interviewing none other than Josiah Spain. Josiah, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
No, this it's awesome to have you in here.
It's really special to have this for B2. I think we've definitely needed a historian for a long time, and we've definitely needed social media, and so I think this is something that is a great way to, as you said, broadcast the awesomeness of B2 to the world.
And we really appreciate your support and for coming on. So let's get started, right? And tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background and where you come from.
I've come from a Army family. My dad served. My dad was a 92 grad. Both my parents are from the South. So my dad's from Pensacola, Florida. My mom's from Auburn, Alabama, and they both lived there for majority of their lives. Me, on the other hand, they were stationed in Germany. My dad was finishing up his company command time and transitioning to come teach at West Point. So anyways, in that transition back to the United States, just about a week after my dad's last duty station, or the time at Germany finished up, my mom came over to America, came back, went to stay with her family in Alabama, and I was born sort of during a move. It popped out, and so it's always a tricky question. People ask where I'm from, right? Because I was born during a move in Alabama. We moved to North Carolina for 2 years. My dad attended grad school, and then came to West Point, lived there for 3. So this is 2002 to 2005. So I was born in 2000. So going forward, we moved to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. We were there for 3 years. Dad was deployed for 2 of them. So that was during the surge and whatnot. And then we moved to D.C. for a year, and then to Schweinfurt, Germany for 2. And then came back to the United States, went to like Boston, Massachusetts kind of area, went to live on Air Force Base called Hanscom Air Force Base out there. And then moved actually to West Point. My dad come teach again for 4 years. So I think a thing to point out is, I guess, when I wanted to come to West Point, I was in 6th grade. I remember one day I came home from school. I was being bad or something. I think I pinched some kid or did something dumb, as a typical Josiah fashion. And I remember just being scolded, just feeling terrible and like no direction in what I'm doing. And I knew I was talented. I knew I was smart. I was a wrestler at the time. And I realized, I want to go to West Point. And I looked myself in the mirror and said, I'm going to West Point. And I had the same mindset. I showed up first day of high school, showed one of my classes. We introduced each other, and I told the whole class, like, I'm going to West Point. It's really funny to look back, like, hey, that was 2014 or 2014 was high school, 2012, 2011. So that's a long time to really have a high set on West Point. So I definitely want to come here for a long time. And it's interesting. I have 3 siblings. My brother's going to Harvard next semester. He is. Wow. But he didn't want to go to West Point. He definitely high achieving and whatnot. But it's not because my parents forced us. It's not because they made us walk around and march and PT every morning. My dad and my mom were pretty, I want to say laissez-faire, but they definitely set a really good example, but they never force us to do anything. And, I have 2 younger siblings. I still have no idea what they're going to do. And we're all super different. And just because I grew up in a military family or whatnot it definitely has some influence, right? But there's definitely like personal choice in the path I choose. When I don't want to be my dad, and I want to be different. I don't want to do the same thing he's done. Now I definitely aspire to be like him. My dad, it's awesome, but I'm Josiah Spain, not Everett Spain.
So your dad's a 92 grad. Mm-hmm. He still teaches here. So you're still continuing on your family heritage at the school. Yeah. And you said you lived here twice before you came back to go to school here, right?
So I lived here just once before.
Just once.
So it was 2002 to 2005.
But still, it's pretty cool to see everything come full circle back around. Yeah. So that's great. It's thank you for sharing, your strong bond with your family and everything. But speaking of which, it's kind of a tough time in the world right now. It's 2020. Yeah. There's a pandemic going on. If people haven't checked the news in the past 6 months, but tell us a little bit about when you were going to West Point during the pandemic.
Yeah,
starting from March.
Yeah, so I was supposed to go to Kazakhstan originally before spring break, and about the day before we left, which is the last day of spring break, they canceled the trip to Kazakhstan. And so I just mentioned my brother's going to Harvard next semester, and so I went with my dad and my brother. Instead of going to Kazakhstan, I went with them to Boston, and we went to go check out Harvard for a few days for my brother and just see what's up. And it's funny, he sat on the last class at Harvard before they canceled classes for the semester, and you could see just the trickle down. The entire world kind of freaked out when MIT and Harvard canceled classes. There's just this domino effect going down, and left and right things were closing, and we got to go skiing, but that was about the last fun thing I got to do for a few months. So we came back to West Point. At that time, I live in Post. Our house was under renovation, so there's mold in our historic, the original house that we live in is built in the 1820s, and so had mold in the basement, so we had to go move to a smaller quarters on the other side of Post. And actually, during that time, I know I had a buddy of mine, his parents, when he came to West Point, his parents moved back to China, the Chinese Americans, and I knew he had no family in the United States, and so I reached out to him and said, hey, you need somewhere to stay, and he did, and he ended up staying he thought, originally it was going to be 2 weeks before we could go back, and 2 weeks turned into a month, and a month turned into 3 months, and before you know, he stayed until, probably about a month after graduation. So yeah, COVID at West Point was a little different. It was definitely nice to feel that safety being in a gated community with other Americans who feel strongly about public health measures and whatnot. It was clear that West Point's committed to a strong and safe response. It's challenging. The data is weird. We don't know what's going on. I think at first it was pretty scary to be in New York, but now as the condition, New York is one of the safest places to be because of I think Governor Cuomo had a pretty strict response, and I think New York set a pretty good example of how to deal with. Now, I'm not saying that it's terrible what happened, and it's 33,000 people in New York died. So there's definitely two sides of the issue I look at there, but I'm really glad. This is probably one of the first times I ever say I'd be glad to be in New York in some sense. Because right now it's very safe to be in New York. But school was good. We were online, which is a different challenge. But it was kind of for me, I saw it as, it's West Point without all the extra. There's no physical component. There's no military. It's just school. So I think it was a little bit easier. And I also had a classmate of mine in the house at the same time. So that was interesting. But it was a good semester, and it'd be my best semester academically, either because it got easier or maybe had more time, maybe some of both. And then, so the summer, then I took 2 STAP classes. I took 2 summer classes. I took PL 300, which was a great time to really reflect on how to lead. And then I took a class on, it was called Sangguayani. I'm a Chinese major, so I took a class on the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which, if you don't know, is work written in the 14th century. Has a literary equivalent, so Shakespeare has a pretty strong influence on English. This work has a huge influence on Chinese, and so it's kind of I don't want to say it's the Shakespeare of Chinese, but it's definitely a work of equivalent significance. And so I spent 3 weeks doing that, and I think it was really good. It was a really great time to spend with my family and whatnot, and recharge before coming back here. So, and
I'm sure you got a lot of good PT in. I'm sure. For all the people listening at home, you should see this guy do pull-ups, do the IOCT, because he just grinds through it. So this guy's a hard worker here. But I'm sure you got some good physical training in there. And then our last question, we have a few more minutes left, is you mentioned you took PL 300 this past summer, psychology of leaders in the military. And you're a Cal this year, so one of the upper 2 classmen. So what's your personal leadership philosophy?
Yeah, great question. And PL 300, we spent a whole paper on this, and it really made me think about what it is. What really is it? And it comes down to really 3 things: for me. It's excellence, humility, and leader development. And so first take excellence, right? The idea is kind of there is like competence, especially in a high peer environment like West Point where everyone's kind of similar age. I mean, dude, I was 19 until a few days ago. And I'm leading people who are between 18 and 24 years old. You got to show people you're competent, that you can lead. It's not a matter of seniority in high peer environments. I mean, we're going to go to the Army. There's going to be NCOs out there who are older, have more combat experience. You got to show them that you can lead. And so first thing is take care of yourself. What that means at West Point, get good grades. Get good MD grades. Do well at summer details. Kick ass in the IOCT, ACFT, and all physical events. That's what that means first. Then the humility component is, C.S. Lewis once said, it's not thinking. So humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. And so what that means is having a focus on others and have this other mindset. And then the idea there is like, if you're a leader, you say that's the most important job I have is taking care of my guys, and you constantly are thinking about others. And so that, so a leader who's competent and constantly thinking about others is awesome, but it's still not enough. And so that's where the leader development piece comes in. And that's more of, okay, I love you guys enough that I'm going to push you to be excellent. I'm going to push you to be humble, and I'm going to push you to be better. And so that's kind of how the philosophy kind of works. It starts with the self and slowly expands. And I definitely have incorporated that a little bit into, how I want to lead this next semester and whatnot. And I think a little bit of the B2 vision statement that we have. So, let's see, man, I'm excited. See where it goes.
And you have a great company to do with, just right here in B2.
Absolutely.
So, and then you did mention it was your birthday a few days ago, right?
It was.
So happy birthday,
thank you.
Thanks for spending your time in the show today.
I guess the big 20. So
big 20. So Josiah, we really appreciate your time today on Dog Pound Podcast. I kind of messed it up at the end there. So you can find this podcast once again on YouTube at B2 Bulldogs Media, on our Instagram page at B2 Bulldogs, and on the web at www.b2 Center for History at WordPress.com. So, any final thoughts in the last closing seconds?
Thanks for having me, Ben. This is awesome. I think this is going to definitely have a huge impact on B2 culture and kind of broadcasting, what B2 is at West Point, what we stand for, and broadcasting the excellence that we have to showcase. So.
That's a good answer. That's what I like to hear. But thank you so much again for your support, Josiah, and for coming on the show. So, thank you for listening to Dog Pound Podcast once again on WBLD, home of the B2 Bulldogs Radio Network.